Hello, hello, sir.
Hey, teacher, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Teacher. I'm good, thanks.
I'm so happy that you joined me. I'm
Oh, I
super
know.
happy.
It's like, yeah, you were like, okay. I saw I was doing the live, and then you sent me a message, and then I was like, okay.
I, I, I saw you. I was watching you, and I sent you the request. You didn't like
That's because I
join me.
was doing, no, I was
Yeah,
referring to your DM message, and I was just like, okay, sure, thanks. So, thank you
that's
very much
good.
for having me. I don't know why you want to have me when there are thousands of teachers, but I appreciate the
Yeah,
invitation.
I just like your style of teaching. That's why I choose. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how would you describe my style, teacher?
Your style is like fun and interesting, like new methods of teaching. And you've said that. You've said that. You've mentioned that. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if they're new. It's just, well, thank you very much for the compliment. I just
Thank
try to make
you.
a difference, and I think at
Yeah.
the end of the day, when you're learning English, or any other language, let me say it like this: when you're learning a language that's not your native language, whether it's English or it's Arabic or French or Farsi, whatever it is, you
Yeah.
cannot teach it. From my perspective, you can't teach it the same way that you learned your native
Yeah.
language. So.
Exactly.
Even though I'm American and I'm a native English speaker, who cares? It's a global international language. But to all credit, I would need to give credit. I doubt they're on the phone because they're still probably at work, but I would need to give credit to the two directors, Mira and Deborah, that taught me. So when I
Exactly.
went back, because I came from the business world, I was not originally from the teaching world. So when I decided to transition and go from the business world in terms of teaching, I went back and got my TESOL certification, and my two directors were really,
Yeah.
instrumental in terms of the way that I spoke. And so my method is very much like
Yeah.
communicative, fun, and I think when you're dealing with particularly adults, you have to, I think, make it fun and interactive and stuff. So thank you.
Yeah. Like making your class fun, making your teaching style fun is like I think this is the most important thing. Okay. Can we get into it and start our interview?
Can you just introduce yourself very quickly to people that
Okay.
don't know you from the ATW family, and I'll
Okay.
do likewise, and we'll get into it.
I am an English teacher. I work on social media, but actually I'm a student. I'm still a student at university, and I'm from Kurdistan, Iraq, and I'm Kurdish.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right, and hello, thank you for having me. My name is Teacher Will from America, currently living in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. And even though you're a student, you're also a teacher because we're all teachers and students. So thank you, brother,
Yeah.
for having me.
Okay. So shall we start?
I'm ready.
Okay, we will start with this question, and I'm gonna be asking you, how long have you been teaching, sir?
It'll be 10 years in October.
10 years. Okay, that's good. And can you tell me what subjects have you taught till now? And what
As it
subjects do
relates
you teach
only
now?
to English or only to English or
Like
everything?
only to English.
General English, business English, general English, business English, leadership and development, cultural English, IELTS, TOEFL, cultural immersion English,
Wow.
to people that are native all the way up to advanced.
Okay. I think my followers are asking that maybe you could talk more slowly so that they
Okay,
can understand.
perfect.
That's
Sorry.
good.
Well,
Okay.
let
And
me let me say this. I will speak slowly or slower, but one of the things that I would encourage your learners to do is that when I'm on a live Instagram, I typically speak at a slower pace. And depending on your level of proficiency, one of the things that you might want to do is that so that you improve your English, it's not and I will speak slower, but I think this is a teachable moment.
yeah,
One of the
I,
things that I would encourage people to do is that maybe it's not a question of me speaking slower, but it is a question of you training your ear to the
yeah,
different speeds of English. But
exactly.
again, I have taught it'll be my 10-year anniversary in October. general English, business English, grammar English, cultural immersion, English for specific purposes, American culture, American cultural immersion, leadership, negotiations, and millionaire mindset.
That's good. And what subjects do you teach now?
It would depend on my student base. So, yeah, it would really depend because my job now is I teach online for people that are interested. I have a game night coming up, but it really depends on the needs of my students. So most of the time, I would say now it's general English and business English.
Okay, so in your whole experience of teaching, what subjects is the most important, is the most interesting for you?
I would say the ones that I really enjoy the most, just on my personality, is business English and American cultural immersion. Because I do think what is important is that regardless, English is a global international language. So when what I like about business English is that comes from my background.
Yeah.
And so I like that. And what I like about American culture, like what I like about American cultural immersion is that oftentimes people think that in America, if they've not visited or actually lived in America, is that they think a lot of learners think that Americans speak one particular way, and they don't. Yeah, right. And I think it's important that just because, let's use you're from Kurdistan. Why I like American cultural English is because in that class we take a look at how, or at least I take a look at how language, culture, class, race, and ethnicity all play a part of the language.
Yeah, like most of students think that Americans just use street language. Like we don't know that you use academic and business English. Like we think
exactly. Exactly. I mean, if your learners would relate it to their own native language, whatever it is, there's formal English, there's informal English. Yeah. And I think what's important to understand is, at least the way that my approach is that when you're speaking English to someone, it's based on your audience, it's based on your level of English, their level of English, it's based on the situation. It's based on how comfortable or how well you know that person. So again, when people have asked me, oh, Teacher Will, do I need to understand, do I need to understand slang, or do I need to understand idioms? Or it's kind of like that's all part of the English language. And as a person becomes more proficient in the language, then you need to know all of that. But if I'm a beginner, at least from my approach, I'm going to teach them the basics. Then, as they become more proficient, you teach idioms, you teach slang, you teach phrasal verbs, etc.
That's good. Okay. So let's talk about students' level, students' ages. What type of students do you think are the best learners for you?
I would answer your question like this. I don't look at best students in terms of levels. What I would say,
we have, in terms of ages, we have adults, adolescents, teenagers.
Okay. So, teacher, I would answer your question this way. I would still answer it by saying this. There are preferences that teachers might have. I think that each particular level has its own particular opportunities and challenges. So, for example, someone from the age of, let's say, 5 to 8 that teaches kids, for example, right? Shout out to people that teach kids, because they're kids. You might need a little bit more patience, right, than, say, if you teach adults. So the way I would answer the question is this. I have taught people that are from the lowest of 4 all the way up to the age of 60. I don't really care about the age limit. What I would say is this. Adult learners, I prefer because they're adults. With that being said, there are challenges with teaching adults in that because they might have had a negative experience to the language, that they are a little less apt to learn than, say, someone who was a kid. And so their brain is fresh and they're less likely, or they don't care if they make mistakes. So at the end, I don't have a, I think the thing is, I've taught anywhere, again, from 4 to 70. I currently teach right now probably people that are over adults, let's say, but my methodology and the way that I teach them does not differ. Sometimes, last point, sometimes kids actually, if I had a choice, sometimes I would prefer teaching kids because they're more likely to learn and make mistakes and not worry about it, versus when you teach adults, they're sometimes more conscious. I can't make a mistake. My teacher said this. No. So one last thing. If you ask me a question, you didn't, but I will say it like this. If you ask me what level of English do I prefer, whether they are beginner or advanced, now at my journey, I prefer, regardless of the age group, I would prefer beginners. Because when you're beginners, I love beginners right now. Like,
sorry for interrupting. Many teachers don't prefer beginners, actually. Like, they find it hard to teach them.
Again, I can't speak on every teacher. I mean, I think possibly the question becomes why do they find it difficult? Maybe they're not trained, and I believe in certifications. So certainly congratulations on becoming a teacher. If you're in the process of getting your certification, great. If not, I recommend to you. I like teaching beginners now because of the fact that regardless of what age they're at, you have the beginning to mold them and shape them in terms of what you believe the best way to learn the language is. And I do think sometimes teachers find it difficult to teach beginners because their language level is not what it is. Like, obviously, if you teach someone at your level, or if there's somebody like upper intermediate, it's like you have more to work with. However, that's why I'm a proponent of certifications, because you can teach a beginner, for example. You can teach a beginner. Perfect example. I don't know your native language, right? I speak English, I speak French, I understand 2 other languages and speak them a little. But I don't understand your native language. I don't need to understand your native language because I'm an English teacher. And I think what happens is sometimes teachers that are teaching beginners, they find it difficult because either they don't have enough English, or they think that you need to know the native language of your students. No, I don't. I've taught people that, for example, there's a woman that's Chinese that I taught. I know no Chinese. So teaching is verbal communication, nonverbal communication. And I think sometimes why people have problems teaching beginners is because, this is a universal language for what? Stop. This is a universal language for come. So there's a lot of other material that you can use that if you're teaching whether a beginner all the way up to advanced, that you can do. But now at my stage, I prefer beginners.
That was a very, very good point. I like it.
Thank you.
So I was going to ask you this question. What is your teaching style? But you've already explained it.
Yeah, I would just very quickly communicate my teaching style. I would define my teaching style as the following. If I follow traditional teaching, right, the traditional method, my training by having a TESOL certification is communicative. That means the communicative approach, which basically means that you teach a student learning English in situation and context, with fun, with stories, with trying to encourage the student to speak as much as possible, whether it's in an individual setting or group setting.
Okay, that's good. Let's talk about methods that you use. What are some successful methods that you use and differ from other teachers?
Well, I don't know if they're all different from other teachers. I would say a listening techniques, concept checking. For example, one of the ways that you can measure a person's understanding of whether they or not they're understanding a particular grammar concept is by concept checking questions. One of the ways that you can check someone's pronunciation is by a listening technique. So, for example, if the person is trying to say something, they'll be like, no, what did you help them out. Another example is by telling stories. So again, this follows traditional teaching certification processes that I would encourage teachers listening on the line that, you know, they should invest in themselves to do. Certainly, one last point, brother. Certainly, ESL teaching is important, and certainly people can teach online and on Instagram or other applications. But what I find interesting is the following. Most people that come on Instagram or other social medias are viewed it. There's a difference. I'll say it like this. There's a difference between being a teacher on Instagram for entertainment purposes and a teacher that is trying to teach in education. And so oftentimes in your country and other parts of the world, teaching is ultimately a job and profession. So learners, whoever they decide to do, whoever they decide to choose, I think that they should find teachers that have the right personality, know what the teaching methods are, and have certifications. Last point, and we can move on to your question.
Knowledge.
The next question. If I go to a doctor, right? This is, and again, this is why people, you know, can agree or disagree with me, right? Because there's a difference between I'm on Instagram and YouTube, and I also teach face-to-face and online. But most of the time, if we hold teachers to such high esteems, if I would go to a doctor or a lawyer, I would ask them, what's their work experience? What's their qualifications? What's their method? But yet, it seems to be on Instagram, everybody calls themselves teachers, and they don't have the methodology behind it. Now, certainly that's the right for people to do, because we all can do that and people make choices. I just believe in teaching is a profession, and there's a difference between being a teacher offline, educating, and then being a teacher that is for entertainment purposes that most people come on social media for.
That was a good point too. Thank you for answering this question. So talking about listening, how do you think the students can improve their listening skill?
Okay, quickly. There are two forms of listening. There is active listening.
Sorry for interrupting. We want your personal point of view.
I'm going to give you my personal point of view, brother. There are two forms of listening, active listening and passive listening. Some of the activities that I've done before in the terms of listening to improve one's listening skills is the following. For example, one exercise that I love doing with beginners is a game called Telephone. And if people haven't played it, then it's kind of like you line up your students if you have more than one, and then you say, hello, my name is, and then you keep going, do, and see what it comes out the end of the person. That's one good way. So you can play games as it relates to listening skills. Another activity that I've done that I really enjoy doing is that if somebody has like their favorite television series, for example, one thing I'll do is in an individual activity or group activity, I'll ask them like, hey, watch the television series. Great. Well, give me a synopsis of review of what you learned. What did you like? What didn't you like? And then focus on a vocabulary. So those are two examples. Very quickly, the difference between passive listening and active listening is the following. A lot of times people will watch television series, movies, listen to podcasts. All of that is good. That means you're passively listening and you're acquiring the knowledge. But what I like to encourage is active listening. So an activity that I will do is, and have done in the past, for example, I encourage learners like, okay, you have a favorite, what's your favorite television series? Let's say, for example, it's Friends, or your favorite movies, Avengers. Well, one of the things that I'll do is like, we'll watch Like, let's say we watch Avengers for 5 minutes, right? And then I'll say, okay, you're Thor, you're Scarlet, you're Iron Man, and act it out. You listened, now repeat what happened. So I think there's a difference, because a lot of times people will listen, they'll listen passively, but they don't have a time to practice. So when you listen, I think you need to practice by actually being active about it. And then you can tie that in, for example, last recommendation that I've done. For those people that want a really good skill or a really good thing that I like to use is whatever your favorite book is, like whatever book it is, whatever you enjoy to read. You remember, like, when we were a kid, most people, when they were a kid, their mom or their dad, they read bedtime stories. Well, you can do the same in English, like a bedtime story or a lullaby, right? So you can do the same in English with a book and read the book out loud so that you can hear yourself actually speak. Because a lot of times people don't like the way they sound. So those exercises, 2 types, active, passive, different activities.
You've already talked about some parts of speaking skills, but I will ask you this question. How can students improve their speaking skills?
Okay, first thing they have to do is speak. It's a great question. We get that question all the time. How can I improve my speaking skills?
I know many words, but I cannot speak.
Oh, yeah. Right. I don't. Okay, first thing is you have to speak. And I know that might be a little scary and afraid for people, but I want to say it like this. Whatever your native language is, the only way that you got better by it is by speaking. The only way that you got better cooking is by cooking or riding a bike. So in order to improve your speaking, you have to speak. Are you going to make mistakes? Yes. Making mistakes is part of the learning process. You made mistakes in your native language, you don't remember it. Now, when people say, I don't have anyone to speak with all due respect, that's not true. That's a lie. Because we have the internet. If there's anybody in Kurdistan right now, and they're saying they have nobody to speak English with, that's not true, because you have the teacher that speaks English. You have friends or family that speak English in your country. If you don't have people that speak English in your country, you have what is called, hopefully if you have it, you have the internet. You have WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups.
Many applications for that.
Many applications. And then you have private tutors. So I think the key to speaking is this. One needs to speak, number one. Number two, try to use the language as much as possible, even if you're at the beginner. You can talk by yourself. And you want to, even if it's like a word, a phrase, a sentence, that's step number two. Step number three is that you develop goals, like short-term goals and long-term goals. Last point about speaking is that I would encourage people listening to this call, particularly if you're at the higher levels, upper intermediate and above. I would encourage people to, if they don't want to use applications, which are free, and if they don't want to pay for teachers, because teachers, that's a job, then what they can do is, I would encourage what people need to do or have an opportunity to do is create, like find 2 or 3 of family members or good friends and create a speaking club.
Yeah,
create a speaking club, and where you pick a topic and you just speak about it. So again, the only way that you improve on your speaking is if you speak. Yes. Do people have fear? Yes. When I learned how to speak a foreign language, did I have fear? Yes, I did. But the only way I got better at it is by doing it. And I think the last point about speaking, you got to practice. If you don't do it, you'll lose it. So I would just say speak and find somebody if you feel as though that you need help. So for example, if self-study doesn't work for you, if WhatsApp groups don't work for you, if Telegram don't work, find a tutor or a private tutor that works for you, that is within your price range, within your budget, and that will help you achieve your goals. Because last point, so many people, how do we speak? Is English important, right? There are so many teachers out there. No, everyone can we all know that English is important, right? For many different reasons. My thing is this. If you're not getting the results that you want, then you need to find a teacher to help you. People will go to the gym and pay money for a personal tutor. People will go to the barber shop and the salon and pay money for their hair or get a private coaching. Teaching is a job, so find a teacher that works for you and find out, like, okay, what's their teaching style? And last point, regardless, we all have preference. I like chocolate ice cream before vanilla ice cream, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I love it, right? So one of the things that I would encourage people to do is that a lot of times people say, because I saw it in the comment section, how do I speak like a native? How do I speak like a native? What a lot of people do is...
You didn't need to do that.
Yeah, like what a lot of people do is they always say they want a native teacher. Well, here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. English is a global international language. And I happen to be from America, and I happen to be a native English speaker. And when people come to me and say, I want to speak like you, I say to them, you don't need to speak like me. You need to speak by yourself. You need to own the language. I will teach you how to speak fluently with clarity and intonation. So when finding a teacher, you can have a preference of whether somebody is a non-native teacher or native teacher, but it shouldn't be your only thing. You should find a teacher that has the personality that works for you, that has the qualifications, that's going to meet your needs at the budget you want.
This is it. Okay, that's good. Okay, so we will come to the importance of listening skill to you. How important is listening skill to you?
I think listening is very important. It's like with any language. Okay, all 4 language skills are important. The first skill that we learn, I'm going to relate it back to the native language. Listening is very important because it builds the foundation. When I'm learning Arabic or French or Kurdi or Farsi, the first thing that I learned how to do, if I was not deaf, was listen.
Good listening.
Right. So by listening, I will hear the sounds, I will hear different accents, I will hear different dialects. So listening becomes very, very important. And again, what I think a lot of students don't focus on. So listening is extremely important. All 4 skills are important, but listening is very important. What I think happens is that why people have a disconnect between listening. Like I listen to all, for example, teacher, you hear this. I listen to all of these movies and I listen to all of these podcasts and I listen to all of your videos, but I can't speak.
The problem is...
The point is, once you listen to something, you have to repeat it. It's the same as your native language. When you were learning your native language, your family, your friends would say something to you, and what did you do? You repeat it. English is no different. And I think one of the things that I try to do with my students, right, and with the ATW family is, I'm like, okay, hold on, people, stop, like focus 1 minute. English, every language, and there are over 6,500 languages in the world. So what I try to tell students is, if you relate things to your native language, like how did you learn how to speak Kurdish? How did you learn how to speak Arabic? Well, I spoke. Well, what did you do? I listened. Great. And what did you? And then after you listened, what did you do? I spoke. Great. English is no different. So I think a lot of times, if people, one of the things I try to do is like kind of relate it to their native language. Like the same thing. Like how do I learn grammar? I want to be fluent in grammar. I'm like, okay, let's relate it to your native language. Like when you started speaking Kurdish, what's your native, is it Kurdi?
Kurdish.
Or Kurdish. Thank you, sorry, Kurdish. Sorry, I'm late. When you learn, like for all you Kurdish speakers out there, here's a question. When you learned to start, when did you become fluent in Kurdish? Most people would say, or when did you become fluent in your native language, or you were able to have a conversation? Most people said, hold on one second. Mr. Games, with all due respect, that's not really a word that you would want to use with me because we really don't know each other that well. So we ain't that familiar. Anyhow, when did you learn how to become fluent in Kurdish? Most people would say by the time they were 5 or 6, right?
Yeah.
So when you're becoming fluent, when you people ask me the question about how to learn grammar, you learn not that grammar is not important because it is, but it's how you learn it. When most people say, hey, when did you become fluent in Kurdish? 5 or 6, great. When did you learn the formal rules of Kurdish grammar? Then most people, well, let me use English. I learned to become fluent in English, let's say when I was 6, right? And then I learned the formal rules of grammar when I was, let's say, in high school, 13 or 14, right?
Yeah. Good.
English is no different. You learn when you're learning the language, when you're learning English, you're using grammar.
You learn with grammar.
You and I, brother, are learning English right now, right?
Yeah.
We're speaking English right now. We're using grammar. We're using we're doing something right now. Oh, that's present continuous. Or we used idiomatic expressions, right? So the thing is, I think what happens is a lot of times people are afraid of grammar because not that grammar is not important, but in my humble opinion, for what it's worth, they're learning grammar in the wrong way. They're learning the rules of grammar before learning grammar in context and situation. And so I would encourage your learners, if they have YouTube, they can go to my YouTube channel and look at a video. My YouTube channel is ask_teacher_will. They can go to a video that is called, 1 + 1 = total English. And that video was basically to say, very quickly, when you're learning grammar, you learn in context and situation. When you learn when you're learning vocabulary, you learn to define it. And perfect example, I asked my students one time in class, I said, what is this? They were like, bottle. I was like, great. What's inside the bottle? They were like, water. And I was like, what's water? And they were like, water. And I'm like, no, what's water? Right?
It's a liquid.
Thank you. Here's my recommendation, whether you're learning grammar, whether you're learning anything you want to learn in English. Here's my recommendation. 1 + 1 = total English. If this is water, if you're able to explain it, give a definition, use in sentence, that's the one. The one is the explanation, right? One is what it is. The other one is to use that English or whatever it is in a sentence and if you can do that, you know total English. Now, why do I say that quickly about grammar? Real life story teacher. I was in class one day and I said to the students, I said, where have you traveled lately? They said they have traveled. They said, I said, where have you traveled lately? They said, I have traveled to Dubai. And I said, okay, explain what that means. And they were like, present perfect. And I was like, what does present perfect mean? Present perfect. And most of the time, when it comes to grammar, people know the rules of grammar, but they don't know how to explain it. That's why I did the video 1 + 1 = total English. So you explain it. When learning English, at least my approach is explain it, situation, context then the rule. And then what becomes is most of the time when people are learning the rules and not knowing how to explain it.
Okay, my personal point of view is the same. They don't have to memorize the rules of grammar. They just have to know how to use them in a situation. So don't memorize.
Bro, that's why you're a teacher and you're doing great things. I mean, you're exactly right. I think the only time the rules become important is if somebody wants to be a teacher, they're doing it a teacher, or they're doing it in an academic setting, or you need it for like writing a book or something. But even in Kurdish, like if you ask most people, let me say it like this: if you ask most people in their native language to explain a grammatical rule, they wouldn't be able to explain it. They just use it.
But teachers will know because their job.
Right. Exactly. Teachers will know, right? But I think but I think sometimes the problem, respectfully, with some teachers is that they explain they say the rule, like they say the first conditional, present perfect, future perfect, phrasal verb. They say the rule, but they don't know how to explain it, and then you wonder why students don't. So for me, that's why I did, like when I learned French, that's how I learned it. I learned it like, okay, you have to know how to explain the word, what the word means, use the word in sentence, whether it was vocabulary or grammar or whatever it is.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, so that was amazing. Okay, so let's come to no words left. Let's come to speaking, the importance of speaking skills to you. They listened for like
I think so, yeah,
8 hours,
beautiful.
9 hours.
Speaking is a very important skill. Why? Well, when you speak in English, you're able to convey your thoughts, your ideas, your dreams. You're able to express yourself. So speaking is very important. How do you speak? Well, you have to speak. If you don't speak, you will not improve. And a person has an opportunity to devote time and resources for it. But speaking is very, very important. One way I would say to improve their speaking skills, particularly as they become at a higher proficiency level,
Yeah,
is by writing. And I know writing is a hard thing to do, and a lot of people don't like writing. They don't like writing in their native language, and they don't like writing like in English, right? But my thing is, here's where writing becomes important, at least for me, as someone who is English speaker, native, and did not like writing. Writing for me allowed me, when you're writing, you have to convey what's in your head on a piece of paper. It organizes your thoughts. And it was a great way for me to learn vocabulary or vernacular or lexicon. So if a person really wants to become a really good speaker, I would encourage them to write and I would encourage them to read. They go hand in hand. Most of the time, what people want to do is the only thing they want to do is speak. And then they wonder why they don't remember or they're only using certain vocabulary words. Why? Because of the fact that, in my opinion, they're not reading enough, they're not writing enough, they're not feeding their brain or watch. Well, people don't read now. They listen to ebooks and podcasts, but they're not feeding their brain. So when you learn to write something and you need to read something, yes, Hugo, writing requires more effort. It's very easy to speak, but when you write something, you got to think about what you said. No, is there a sentence structure? Is there the right word? All of that other stuff. But at the end of the day, if you want to speak, you have to speak. And then also, you just have to find people to speak with. I'm sorry, like the ATW family knows this about me. I'm sorry. In 2021, there is no excuse for you not to speak English. With all due respect, there's no excuse. Like there's none. That's called not being devoted or allocating time.
Yeah. They are just making excuses like there's nobody.
Well, you said that, teacher, you said that. See, you could say that because if I said that, they get mad at me. But yeah, I mean, let me put it to you this way. I always say this I usually say this to students in my own life. If English is important to you, learners, please listen. If English is important to you, at whatever age you are, at whatever country you are, wherever you're at, whatever level you are, if English is important to you, you will find the time to do it. And if you don't find the time to do it, that's not right, that's not wrong. You have to live with the consequences. And for those of you that say you want to learn English and you want to speak English, and yet, forgive me, teacher, let me say it like this. And hold on one second. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, let me just school you on something very quickly. Perhaps you're talking amongst yourselves, but just as a public reference from a cultural perspective, I would encourage you people that when you say, yo, what up, nigga, and where's the nigga from, that is terminology that oftentimes has a possible negative connotation, meaning the following. I know that word is regularly used, and that's fine. But what I would encourage you to do is I would encourage you to go to my Instagram. Hold on. I would encourage you to go to my Instagram video and look at the origin of that word. When you happen to be talking to someone that happens to be an American, that happens to be black, of African descent, and you call me that, that is offensive.
It's
That's like if
offensive.
somebody would call you a
Like
takruni or an app. It's offensive. So
It's
please
very-
be mindful of the words that you use, because we ain't on that. We don't know each
Like,
other that well.
Sometimes they message me, they DM me, and they tell me, hey buddy, like, hey nigga. They tell me nigga, but they don't know the real meaning
Right, but
of
see,
nigga.
but brother, very quickly, because what happened? Okay, listen. So very quickly, that word has evolved around here. So I'm not mad at the person, right? It has a different
Like, they didn't
connotation. Like
understand it.
people, like bro. People, listen. I know people in Saudi. I know people in Kurdistan. I know people in Lebanon that are not black, and I'd be like, yo, what up, nigga? What? Okay, but I'm saying that's different than I don't use the word, and I can use the word, and right. So my thing is this. No, I don't care, but I just needed to educate people, because here's why. Man, listen, it's not that I don't care. Here's why I stopped for that, and I'm going to go back to the brother's question. If you went to the United States right now, or you went outside of your culture right now, and you didn't know the person, and you called somebody and you said, what up, nigga, they might punch you, or you might be hit, or you might be put in a particular circumstance. So I just want to educate the brother, saying, like, I'm not saying that he can't use it, but my thing is, I'm like, just be mindful, like, how you use it, because if you got to be very careful of that word. Going back to your question, teacher, I'm sorry, ask it again.
Okay. So we were talking about speaking skill. I think you've explained that the importance of speaking skills. And one last question about speaking. Talking into the mirror is effective or not? Like talking to
Okay, yeah, well, okay.
that.
Ways to improve your English. I'm going to give you 2 suggestions, learners. Number 1, talk in front of a mirror. Number 2, that's kind of old school. Number 2, record yourself.
Recording, yeah.
Make a selfie. Now, how interesting it is, people can make selfies on TikTok and Snapchat and all this other stuff. Why do I say make a selfie? When I teach my students offline, what I say is, I'm like, you know what? Make a selfie or talk in front of the mirror. Why? Number 1, most people do not like the way that they look when they're speaking English. They don't like the fact that they think that they sound wrong and there's something the matter with them. One needs to understand that when you're speaking English, the majority of there's 2 types of communication: verbal communication and nonverbal communication. So when you look in front of a mirror, or when you do a selfie, what's the value of that? You can actually look at yourself in your mouth and see how you're pronouncing and saying the words, number 1. Number 2, that's verbal communication, what comes out of your mouth. What is also as equally as important, particularly from a cultural perspective, I'm American, I'm from America. What also becomes important is that when people are speaking, let's relate it back to people's native language. If I'm speaking Kurdish, right, I have verbal communication, what comes out of my mouth, and non-verbal communication. So people have to get comfortable. When you record yourself or you look in front of the mirror, you can see yourself, how you are when you're speaking English.
Judge yourself.
And exactly. And most of the time, that's hard for people, because sometimes what happens is you will see, I've seen people when they're speaking, like, for example, when I tell my students, I'm like, okay, make a selfie. They're like, no, teacher, I can't. I'm like, why? I'm not going to make I don't care. Because that prepares you. When you're learning to speak in front of a mirror, or you're learning to speak in front of a selfie, then that prepares you when you have to speak to somebody at a restaurant, at a hospital, at the movies, and it brings you confidence. Exactly.
So that how is to be confident. Okay, that's good. So let's come to the obstacles. This is the most important thing. The obstacles that most of the students face while listening? Let's just talk about listening.
While listening?
Yep.
They don't understand the words. They don't understand the phrases. They're not willing to the pace of a person speaking. So obstacles are they think that they should understand every word. And if you relate it back to Kurdish or one's native language, when you're listening, your brain is processing not every individual word, but groups of words and phrases.
Yeah.
So that's an obstacle. A second obstacle that happens is what someone said earlier. Oh, the person is speaking English too fast, or you're speaking too fast. So one way to overcome that is a couple things. Number one, you have to train your ear to the different speeds of English, which can be television, podcast, Instagram videos such as yourself. That's number one. And number two is that in terms of listening skills, is that an obstacle is that when people are having an obstacle, they're not writing down words or phrases that they don't understand and using listening as a homework exercise, for better lack of terminology.
That's good. So, do you think accent is an obstacle?
What do you think?
Accent? I think it's an obstacle.
Why is that?
Because like we've got different accents, and still students are confused. Which accent should I use? Which accent should I listen to?
Brother, I got that. That's cool. Brother, let me ask you a question. Where in Kurdistan do you live? North, south, east, or west?
South.
Okay, great. So let me ask you a question. So if I live in northern Kurdistan, you have a southern Kurdish accent, correct?
Yeah, we have different dialects.
Okay, different dialects, different accents, right? But yet you understand each other because Kurdish is your native language, right?
We understand each other, yeah.
So what's the difference between that and English? If your native language has different accents, then why wouldn't English have different accents? But yet and still you understand each other because the foundation is the fluency, a level of understanding, right?
So it comes back like training again.
No, I'm just asking. No. I'm going to answer your question. I just want you to think about what you said. You said, and I'm answering your question, and I understand I'm your guest, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I just want you to think about what you just said. And I want the learners to think about what they just said. The ATW family knows this, but I just want you to think about what you just said. You said that you live in the southern part of Kurdistan, and that if I lived in the northern part of Kurdistan, our accent, our dialects would be different.
But we still can understand each other.
But you still can understand each other. Why?
Exactly.
Because you're fluent in English, correct? I mean, you're fluent in Kurdish, correct?
Yeah. We have the same
So
language.
let me answer your question this way. What I find interesting that you said is this, brother. You said that as it relates to your native language, that what happens is that though the accents or dialects are different, you still understand each other because you are fluent and you understand Kurdish. But yet, when it comes to accents, you find accents in English problematic. That is your opinion. I respect your opinion. But let me offer my perspective, which you respectfully and most learners have not even thought about, or if they haven't thought about it, it's fine. And brother, I mean no disrespect, you can never have me back again. This is my point. And I would encourage your learners to go watch my video on YouTube entitled, or just watch the video on YouTube. Let me say something with all due respect. English is a global international language. And yet, most people listening to this call desire to have a native speaking accent. They desire and they want to have a Native American accent or an American accent, or they want or desire to have a British accent. Now, why is that? They can have that. That's fine. But what happens is this. Brother, listen to me. I'm a native English speaker. I was born in the United States of America. Did I ever say on this video or in this live Instagram right now that you need to have my accent? No, I did not. Did I ever say that you needed to sound like a native? No, I did not. But the reason why you and most of your learners on the call want to sound like a native and have native accent is because that's all you're conditioned to believe and see. Most of the people watching and listening to this call right now, they watch videos saying sound like a native, fix your accent, accent reduction. And they are conditioned to believe that there is something the matter with them. With all due respect to you, brother, and everybody else, you will never be a native English speaker. Let me say that again because I want that to absorb. You and most people on this call will never be a native English speaker. And you know what? That's okay. Because English is a global international language. And what Teacher Will focuses on is the following. I focus on fluency. And part of fluency is being able, first and foremost, what is most important to me, is being able to convey the English language, to be understood, to be clear, to have proper pronunciation and intonation. But see, when it comes to accent, there's something in the world that's called accent discrimination. There's something in the world saying that, you know what? Oh, wow. And brother, here's where I'm so passionately respectful about you. Most people, most of your learners are trying to have and sound like a native. Now, let me say, if you need or you want to sound like a native and have a native accent, there is nothing the matter with that. What I would encourage people to do is that I would encourage people to figure out what specific native speaking accent they want. Because, for example, I'm American. And there are over 40 different regional accents in America. So if you want to sound like a native and have a native accent, then I would encourage people to figure out what specific accent they want, whether it's American, whether it's British. And then if it's British, figure out what accent they want. If it's American, figure out what accent it's want. And find those teachers and content providers out there that will help you. It takes a lot of mimicking. It takes a lot of shadowing. It takes a lot of that, right? That's aspirational for me. But what happens is that you and other learners on the call are so focused on sounding like a native because that's all you've been conditioned to believe. And then what happens is when people in your own country, in Saudi Arabia, in China, in Mexico, and other parts of the world, do not speak or sound like me, then there's something the matter with you. Well, wait a minute. It goes back something to what you said, brother. The problem is this, in my humble opinion, and that's why I'm not considered popular, or that's why I'm considered people don't follow me, or I do not, as a native people, I don't give a damn about somebody's accent. For me. I understand and recognize that accent has a certain privilege. But here's, brother, where I'm going to have you and your other learners think about. For example, if someone wants to have a native accent, right, because that's something that's desired, right? I was watching a video later. Something that is desired is fine, but listen, a lot of times having a native accent, it's associated with certain privileges. It's associated with certain poshness. It's associated with I'm able to pass. It's associated with that I will not be different. It's associated with the fact that someone can't tell I'm different. Well, I'm sorry. I might be American, but I'm black, and I've been different before. So I'm not knocking anybody that wants to have that because most people don't want to feel like the other. But here's the thing. It's a very slippery slope. It's a very scary thing that people that are native and non-native teachers are sitting back and saying, sound like a native, speak like an accent, fix your accent, trying to be something they aren't, and I understand it. Why? Because, right, why? Because there are people that think there's something the matter with them. One last point, brother. It's a very slippery slope, and I want learners to understand this. Not necessarily you, but I want learners to understand this. If we start sitting back and keep saying that sound like a native, but you'll never be native, and in your own language you recognize their different accents, but yet we're trying to but when it comes to English, it's different. Be very mindful, and here's why I say that. Because if we're going to do preference as it relates to accent, and there's a certain privilege with having a native accent, then brother, you and other teachers out there that are non-native, I can make the same argument and say to learners, you know what? You should not follow you as a teacher, and you should not even have him as a teacher. Why? Because he's not native. So you know what? Come and speak come have me as a native teacher. So, at the end of the day, what is most important to me is one's clarity, one's pronunciation. If you want to sound like a native, figure out what accents you want. But I, as someone who was born in America, for me, have and will always be speak natural, speak with ease. Your accent is part of who you are. And if indeed you need to sound a certain way because someone is discriminating against you or because they are biased, like for example, when people come to me and say, hey, listen, you know what? I want your accent. I will tell them, shut up. I will teach you clarity. I will teach you pronunciation. And then after that, I will teach you how to play the game to sound like somebody because people are bigoted. Last point, teacher, and then I'm done. I am sick and tired of teachers and learners getting fixated on having an accent when it's not necessary. And when learners decide that they're going to wake up and embrace who they are instead of stop being like me or everybody else is when the industry will change. And by the way, there are teachers that I know, and this really, I find it interesting and I understand it. Teachers that I know are non-native individuals, and I'm only using non-native as an example. Teachers that are non-native individuals have to fake their accent. Why? Have to fake the fact that they're American or British. Why? Because their own learners won't even accept them. And that, to me, as a human being, is wrong. Did I answer your question, teacher?
That was perfectly right. Absolute answer. Okay, that's good.
Wait. I got to challenge you on something, brother. Then why, if you say that exactly what was right, then why did you say that accents become a barrier?
Accents, I said because of listening. Well, listening is a barrier. Why did I say that?
Right. No, but you know why, teacher? You want to know why? Because we're only used to one accent. That's why it's a barrier. People, if you spoke, brother, here's why it's a barrier. Here's why it's a barrier. If you spoke English in the same accent that you spoke Kurdish, it's a barrier. Why is it a barrier? Because most learners are only listen to English from America or British. But if I heard Kurdish English, Saudi English, Italian English, I'm not, the reason why accents are barrier is because most learners are only listening to one type of accent. And then what happens is they discriminate. Oh no, I don't like the Kurdish accent, speak like me. It's a barrier because we haven't trained our ear. It's just like when I listened to somebody speak Scottish, right? And they were speaking English, it took me a while to understand. I was like, what is this person saying? Are they speaking English? The question was, I was not used to it. So again, I know I'm your guest and I should be quiet. I would just have you think about that. Accents only become barriers to listening because of the fact that we're only training students to only sound and listen to English, American English or British English.
Okay, all the stuff that you've mentioned is that accent is a barrier for speaking. But here is my point. I have been listening to American native speakers, let's say that's just an example, for 7 years, for my whole life. And suddenly, I just click a video and I see a person who is having a Scotland accent, which is very weird, and I know nothing about it. I don't understand anything. So here is the obstacle. So accent is the obstacle for listening. because I didn't get used to it.
Yeah, but but brother, I could say, okay, I respect what you're saying, but let me play devil's advocate with you. That would be the same thing if I say, you know what? Wow, your Kurdish accent is weird. Why? Because I'm not used to it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I think my only point is this: accents, to me, accents show the diversity of the English language, and something becomes less weird once I familiarize myself with it. So, for example, when I grew up in America, I knew a lot of Filipinos. And when they spoke English, originally it was strange to me. Why? Because I didn't hear it. That, like, when I hear people say, like, for example, like when I hear people say, oh, that English is weird or whatever, that somebody could say the same about your language or anybody else. It's only weird because our ear doesn't know it. That's my only point. And if English is global and international in scope, one good way to improve one's listening skills is by listening to different accents around the world. But most people don't want to do that. They only want to listen to American English or British English because that's what they're perceived to be. But yet, the thing is this, wait a minute, let's put it this way. There are more non-native people, quote unquote, there are more people whose English is not their native language than speaks English. So why is it that we have over 1 billion people that know the language? Only between 300 and 400 million are native English speakers, and yet your learners and a lot of others are trying to be like that. It only becomes strange or different because our ear is not used to it. And my concern is that brother, let's just call it what it is. In my opinion, there's accent discrimination. And that accent discrimination exists. Why? Because you were trained to speak and think and speak in a certain accent. That's not right or wrong. I'm not judging you. And then what you did or others learn or do consciously or subconsciously, okay, you got to speak English like that because if you don't, you're considered less than. And what I do not understand as someone who happens to be from America and a native and who also, more importantly, happens to be a human being first, why are we telling people whose native language is not English to sound like a bunch of natives? So next time I hear somebody, because I could say like, oh, wow, you know what? The way you speak, it's strange. You're not strange. My ear isn't used to it.
Yeah. I think that we usually limit the language.
Well, that's by design. That's design.
We only follow one path, like let's say British, and we don't follow America. For example, someone is learning British accent, or let's say British English, and if he or she hears soccer, he will understand or she will understand because he or she only follows one path, which is British English. So,
brother, I mean, listen, my thing is this: people can listen, and I want to be very clear. And maybe you're not used to. Let me preface by saying this.
Yeah.
I do apologize I do apologize for not what I said, but how I said it.
This is your personal point of view. I respect
No. I'm very passionate about that, and you might not be used to my communication style, and I am your guest, so I should apologize for the manner in which I said it.
Okay.
But with the reason, no, but I need to apologize. I'm man enough to do that. But no, I think that you make a valid point. I mean, there's a standard of English, I'll say it like this. There's a standard of English out there, and that standard of English is to sound like a native. And I certainly don't have a problem if somebody wants to sound like a native and have an accent. That is fine. The only thing that I would encourage people to do is first and foremost two things. Number one, please do not discriminate against somebody because you think that they don't sound the way that you think they should sound. And that is the problem that I have. That's number one. And number two is, before accent, for me, I think what is important is to convey one's thought with clarity, with pronunciation. Because, for example, I'm speaking in a particular accent and dialect now, right? Yeah. And then I could switch it up and speak like this, or then I'll not be able to switch it up like this. at the end of the day, I could have any accent that I would want to emulate or copy. And yet, if my pronunciation is not good, what does it matter? And the ATW family knows this. I just think when you talk about limiting, I think that learners sometimes do things that are at detriment. Sometimes they're so worried about having a particular accent that's British or American that it prevents them from actually learning the language. And the other thing is that when you have someone like me or other teachers, it's very interesting. I could, with all due respect, brother, I could play the native card. I could play the native card. I could sit back I could play the native card. I could be on your phone right now or do videos on and be like, you know what, sound like a native. And here's how this is. But for me, that's limiting. And why would I want to do something that hurts? People like, you have the stories just like you've heard the stories just like I have heard, brother. You've heard those stories where it's like, you know what? Yeah. Because people have been bullied, they've been ridiculed, they've been talked about. Why? Because they don't sound the way they think it should sound. And then sometimes what happens is people, I could play the native card, but why would I want to do that when that's a global international language? And so for me, I know that's different for a lot of people to hear. And I know, you know, sometimes the way in which I say things, some people are shocked, but I don't understand the fact. If English is a global international language, why are you trying to sound like a native? And that's different from if you have to do it because of the fact of people's body. But I literally don't understand that. But let me say it like this. I understand it because that's conditioning. And exactly. I understand it because that's what people watch. But for me, I just don't like that as a human being. Because therefore, last point, there's 7 billion people in the world. If you ask most people, would you want everybody to look like you or act like you or eat like you or pray like you? Most people would say no. They like their individuality. They like their identity. But yet, when it comes to English, everybody's trying to sound from one particular region and one particular accent and one particular color. If people would look at native speakerism as an economic system, they might want to ask themselves, are they being a slave to something? Are they mentally enslaved? But that might be a little too deep for people because that might touch on people. Just because you're physically not a slave does not necessarily mean that you're not mentally a slave based on the oppression of putting yourself in a particular accent.
That's good. Okay. So, wow. Like new perspectives, everything else. You just surprised me. Wow. So
why did I surprise you?
Because like your perspectives, let's say, are so precious. They are real, and everybody knows that they are real. They are right, but they don't do it because of some reason.
Well, I mean, I don't know, bro. I mean, it like at the end. I thank you for saying that because at the end of the day, let me just be really honest with myself and say this. This is not it's kind of like, you know what, there's an idiomatic expression that we use. Hey, OGM, there's an idiomatic expression. What I just said is not something that's new. I just had the courage to say it.
Yeah.
What I said is not new. I just have the courage to say it. If people can, and I'm glad that you said this, my thoughts are my own. They're my thoughts. They're my perspective. You can agree. You can disagree. But at the end of the day, I recommend people to make English your own. But what I said is what everybody knows. And the thing is this, I am descendant, and maybe this is too deep, and I don't mean to be deep. My thing is this, learners are learners, they are students, they are consumers. They can follow whoever they want to follow. But on the ATW family, and the people that follow me, I want to, my approach is like, you know what? You give people choices. And I'm sorry, I come from a group of people that were considered slaves. And I was not the only people that were slaves, and black folks were not the only people that slaved. There were some people that are mentally enslaved in their mind. And then when you have somebody say what everybody knows, everybody gets freaked out. Why are you getting freaked out? The truth will either set you free. And again, I don't care what a person does, but let's not say that it exists. We as content, or at least for me, I have an opportunity. I'm not going to buy in of the self-oppression of other people by saying, and the only way that changes if learners want to change the language or think about critically think. But if people want to walk around and be mentally enslaved and they want to walk around and have an accent or be fake, or my thing is this, they can do them. I usually say this to ATW family. Do you, people, do you. Do you. Be whatever you want to do. Do you what makes sense for you. But please do not think that I am radical or that, I guess my thing is, why are people, not you, brother, but why are people surprised for something that we already know that exists? But why? Because most learners are too afraid to say anything. Most learners don't feel worthy of saying anything. And the funny thing is, brother, they are the student, they are the learner, they are the consumer, and they're the ones that hold the money. So help me understand this, learners. Help me understand this. You are the ones with the power and the money. It's pure business, supply and demand. See, the reason why people get away with saying native and marketing and don't say and all this other stuff is because most of you on the call think that you are less than or not worthy, and you're comparing yourself to a bunch of learners that, for example, some of you like the way that I look, but you don't, no, I'm sorry, some of you like the way that I sound, but you don't like the way that I look. That's fine. Who gives a damn? My thing is this, you own the power, and yet you're trying to be something that you're not. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But please, as teacher said, English is global. It's an international language. Is there an opportunity that we can represent the language? Or are some of you so blinded and so enslaved in your mind that you're not comfortable and happy with what you are? And then you get mad at me, or you're like, wow, how can you say that? Oh, well, I just say it's my thought.
That's good. That's good. So one last question is,
yes, brother.
Rank skills from listening, reading, writing, and speaking. Rank them.
Oh my God. Okay. I think from a student's perspective, I would say speaking, listening. This is from a student's perspective. Speaking,
we will come to you.
Listening, reading, and writing.
And yours?
Listen. Oh. Oh God.
And add grammar also, please. Add grammar also. Let's say as a skill.
Oh my God. Okay. Well, grammar would. Okay. Okay. So I think for me, number 1 would be listening. Number 2 would be speaking. Number 3 would be writing. Number 4 would be reading, and number 5 would be grammar. Because I teach grammar in context and situation. I would put grammar at the bottom.
The grammar. So I think students like it. Like.
Yeah. No. I mean, yeah.
I hate grammar actually.
They hate grammar. I mean, for me, I would say speaking first, listening, writing, and reading, and then I would put grammar at the bottom, because when I learn how to speak, I'm learning grammar naturally. That's why I put it at the bottom.
Yeah, this is the point. Yep. So I think we are out of questions now.
Brother, thank you very much for having me. I am sorry if, no, I'm not sorry. Thank you very much for having me. My thoughts were my own. I will apologize for the manner in which I said anything. So I just need to be a man of my word and my own sense of integrity. Learners, my thoughts are my own. They're my perspective. You don't have to agree. But hopefully I've given you something to think about. And the beautiful thing is, it's ultimately your choice. Brother, I hope I was able to help you on your research project. If you ever want to have me back for a live Instagram, you're more than welcome, but I doubt that you will.
No, inshallah, I will. Wallahi, you've brought us like so many new ideas. You've given us so much information about learning language, and you did a lot to me. I really thank you. I've asked lots of teachers, like 4 teachers, they couldn't help me, but you really did an amazing job.
Well, brother, no, my pleasure. Listen, sharing is caring, and when you said to be honest with you, I was like, oh my God, like why does he want to? I got to be honest. I was like, why does he want to speak to me? But then you said research paper, and I was like, you know what? Listen,
Yeah.
you know what? The ATW family is like, sharing is caring, and teachers can do whatever they want, but the ATW family is like, you pass it on. So if it was of value, I'm glad it was, and I hope it helps.
Just to mention this, as I said, I've asked lots of teachers, my college teachers, and I was like, they were ready to do the interview, and I did the interview, but they didn't give me like more detail, more information. Like this question, I asked them, how important is listening to you? They just said it's important.
Well,
it is important.
I don't know. I mean,
details. I need more details for my research paper.
I think well, thank you for that. I think it's the way my brain process information, and I think it's my training, and I do think that I need an area development for me because I'm always in self-assessment. It's just the way that I process, and sometimes I know a lot of times the ATW family thinks this, like a couple OGM. I think sometimes I think too deep, and maybe that's an area development for me, and sometimes I think like, this was really good because sometimes I think too deep, but I think it's important because a lot of times when people are learning English, particularly on internet, we come up with these terminologies and things of that nature, and I think sometimes that people don't give a full understanding. But if you ever have me back, I'll try to have my answers be less deep.
We will
less deep. That's the new word.
We will do life together. We will do life together. I would be so happy. And I really thank you from the bottom of my heart. That was my new video. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I really appreciate it, sir. I appreciate it.
No problem, brother. Good luck. Good luck. Let me know how let me know how the paper, send me a DM message and let me know how it goes out.
I will.
Learners, thank you very much for joining. And at the end of the day, own the language. Yes, brother.
I've recorded this live stream. Yeah.
I'm going to get it.
So,
oh my God, I'm going to get shot.
My research paper.
No, well, that's good. Yeah, it definitely helps you. And by the way, last thing, teacher, if they ask you who is this person or whatever like that, just tell them I'm crazy American.
No. They respect you. They respect you, of course.
All right. Thank you so much. Continued blessings, and let me know how the research paper went. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and so keep practicing, keep learning, own the language, be proud of who you are, and that's it.
Thank you so much. I really
appreciate
it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good night.
Bye.